throughout the show, we've seen Hannah evolve from a teenager to a young woman. What was the process for incorporating, you know, Esme's and your directors and writers, their vision of the coming of age journey to your own vision of an action packed thriller, you know?
From the very beginning of deciding to make a television show of the story, I knew that I wanted it to be much more of a coming of age narrative than the film had been. It suits, doesn't it? It suits the long form genre to allow, it allows time, it allows for much more emotional depth. I've always loved spy and action genres, and I see it's wonderful to put those two things together. Where then, of course, in finding Esme, Creed Miles to play Hannah, suddenly Esme's own journey as a young woman, because she was very young, 17, I think, when we first met her, matches that narrative. And it was one of the most enjoyable things was to explore how that journey that she's going on could be mirrored in the show. And I think there's no question, I think Esme's sensational in season 3, and she's found an authority and a voice which matches that of the character. The other thing that Tom Cohen, the executive producer, and myself really wanted to do was to bring a female gaze to the show through direction. And so way more than half our directors have been women, and all of the directors in the final season are women. And that's partly because they're great directors. Hannah was one of the very first existential action heroines. Since that time, now there are loads, but sometimes they're slightly fetishized, in my view. And we don't want to do that here. The notion of a female gaze on Hannah became important to us. And I think in particular this season, Sasha Polak's work as the lead director of season 3 is astonishing.
This, as far as I know, this is the final season, right? Obviously, you were a writer on the original film. So what led you to the choice of ending Hannah's journey, you know, in after 3 seasons, as opposed to where you ended it in the film?
There are two reasons why it felt right for the 3-act structure, which for the television season to work for me in this case. Firstly, it was an emotional coming of age story. Hannah is a child, essentially, season 1. She is an adolescent, season 2. In this season, she comes to be a young woman, and she emotionally comes to maturity. And that felt like something we didn't even get anywhere near to in the film. The second thing is on the thriller narrative reaches its climax. She really does encounter the people who made her. She finds out who they are. She finds out the secret of that organization, and she finds out why. And she finds out what that organization is really up to. And so that political thriller also comes to its climax, comes to its denouement, in, I think, a way that's shocking and satisfying.
Returning to the film itself, now that you've ended the TV journey, what can you say, or what do you take from the film, and what do you take from the show? What is your comparison between them?
Well, for me, they're so different in my imaginative memory. From the film, I take the snowy landscapes of the very first 5 minutes. I'll never forget when I first saw them, even though I wrote them, and Saoirse's face for some reason. And from the television series, I remember a completely different thing. I remember a whole emotional journey of a character from a forest out into the world. And I remember the deeply complex emotional relationships that she has both with Eric, played by Joel Kinnaman, season 1, and then increasingly with Marissa, played by Mireille Enos. And in this season, by also that very strange and interesting romantic relationship that she has with Abbas, played by Adam Bessa, wonderfully in this season. So for me, they feel wonderfully different, and they occupy very different parts of my memory.
You have Ray Liotta in this season, you know, as Gordon Evans. How was it to bring him in, and how was it to incorporate him to this narrative and to work with him? What was the process of that?
So the big search for the Gordon Evans character was we needed someone with who's extraordinary, instinctive weight, authority, and menace to really rival Murray and Esme in their role. We needed a vivid performance, and it was so exciting that Ray was turned on by the scripts and wanted to become part of it. But he's a really fun guy in reality, but there is unquestionably in him this menace that he knows he has. And at the same time, what I like about his performance is that there's a vulnerability to it as well. So it's not just here comes the scary. There's love and there's vulnerability. There's all sorts of stuff going on.